You're tuned to Evergreen Media Network. I am Cindy Schwartz, and this is the Patient Partner Show you're listening to. Jeannie Roller and I are talking about medical issues, things that have impacted us. That's why we got involved in doing a podcast, Jeannie and I, because these things did happen to us. We're not going to get involved with that today, but the topic is medical errors, and that's what we found happened to us and our family members or whatever when we started this, Jeannie, and we also got in contact. I want to give her a shout out. I keep forgetting to do that. Is to Misty Roberts on patientmodesty.org is her website. That's how you and I met, because Misty is doing a lot of good stuff for patients. And the modesty, dignity, you can argue whatever you want, but the mission and the message is the right thing. So medical errors, you sent me this, and it was through the NIH. Is that what you told me, Jeannie? And that medical errors are the third leading cause of deaths in the U.S. Now, what is wrong with that statement? And that is probably, as you enlightened me, and I totally agree with you, that when they do statistics about, or they do data about medical errors, how many people are told that they didn't have any medical errors? I was told that. You were told that. So we're not in any statistic. So this goes on to say that 400,000 patients have some preventable harm done to them. And more than 200,000, and this is per year, more than 200,000 deaths annually are to preventable errors, which includes surgical errors, diagnostic errors, medication errors, equipment failure, falls, infections. So we want to talk about sepsis and different things like that. And communication failure, which I think that should be in bold letters as the top one across the board, but that's just my opinion. It's astounding, because this is just the tip of the iceberg of people, like we said, we're not considered medically harmed. We're not considered medical errors. We aren't. So there's two people right there. So what's the percentage of people other than us that belong in the category that did have medical harm or medical errors? And what are we really looking at? You're talking about almost 500,000 people right here. That's really eye-opening. Your thoughts, Jeannie?
And that number comes from them doing studies of the death certificates of different people.
Okay.
But, that number probably is much higher. Some people will argue that it's much lower because they just don't state on the death certificate. Generally, they don't, that they died from medical harm, medical errors. So, it's an educated guess from looking at what happened, from going through medical records and so on and so forth. So I personally feel the number is probably much higher because, as you just pointed out, what happened to you and to my husband was never counted in any of this. So how many of these instances aren't counted? I would say that number is pretty high because there's an awful lot of, as we also found out, medical gaslighting is, we say this happened and they'll say, oh no, it did not.
Yeah.
And so I think the number of actual harm of people who didn't die is fairly high. Just think of the people that in your circle that around you that have been given some medicine that they couldn't take, or they said they couldn't take, but it never made it into the medical record. I think you were a victim of that, Cindy, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Another one with mine was latex. I'm highly allergic to latex, and that kind of went out the window. And then when I asked, because I had hives and all kinds of side effects and whatever, because they did use latex, the worst part about it was an endoscopy procedure they did. So you can imagine that on the inside of your throat with latex stuff. I asked to see my chart, and when I lifted the chart up, I mean, I was pretty mad about all of it. The little bit I could talk with, as bad as my throat was. The number one thing on the beginning of that chart on the front page in red, in bold letters, was allergies to latex.
Yeah. Wow.
So I don't know how that communication got lost, but there it was for everyone to read.
Yeah. Right. And, in my husband's case, he told during cardiac rehab that he has adverse reactions to Versed and to never ever give it to him. And we saw him write it. And we went back later, 2 weeks later, requested his medical records, and they had crossed it out. So,
that's just two instances, right? It's just two instances. Yeah. We've had so many people on this show that the things happened as well to them. So do the math. You're right about that. The thing about infections, too, I think it is fairly well known, and sadly that it is fairly well known that sepsis is one of the major causes of a lot of this stuff in hospitals. I mean, it's some places it's just rampant, if you will, along with other stuff. And I mean, thank goodness if they can get some busting antibiotics into you to stop that, or quell it, whatever you want to call it. But if they don't, that's pretty rampant too. I mean, there's a bunch of things here. Yeah. There really is. There really is. And I agree wholeheartedly with a lot of these outpatient clinics and surgical places, things like that, because it doesn't seem right now. I mean, I have not heard anything, if you have, Jeannie, that those kind of things are as prevalent in the atmosphere that they have, because you're in and out kind of thing. It's not, you're not in for a very long time.
Well, I know there's a hospital here in Indiana not too long ago that they weren't sterilizing the instruments right. We've talked about that before, that some of the techs that they hire for different positions, we don't feel, you and I, that their educational process is enough. A lot of them can go to like a 90-day certificate program. The sterilization of instruments is a big factor in spreading infection.
Right.
I know my mother's cousin, about 2 to 3 years ago, she died. She went in for a knee replacement, and she died from sepsis.
Yeah.
From the operation. So, I mean, yeah, I've known of several people. I've read an article where children are more likely to die of sepsis because they just don't diagnose it in children as they do in adults, which for whatever reason, I'm not sure. But yeah, there was that old joke. Well, if you go into there was a sign up in a hospital that says, "Sick people need not enter."
Yeah.
And, it's like,
Right.
So.
Well, this list is, I can see where people make mistakes. I mean, surgical errors, diagnostic errors. We had Helene on a podcast previously that was talking about that, the diagnosis. I mean, make sure you get the right one. And how do you know? Right. I mean, you have to get a couple of different opinions, go to different doctors and stuff if you're not sure about that. I mean, we're in a quandary here. It isn't where it used to be years ago, and I'm not saying that was always right either. But you could go to the one doctor and you kind of had, okay, this guy I know is going to be all right, or this woman is going to be okay as far as, the doctor and telling you all that stuff. But you really just don't know anymore. There's so much stuff going on out there. Medication errors, we just talked about that. Equipment failure. I mean, that happens. I mean, it's a lot of this is not really anyone's fault. I think one of the biggest things on this for me is the communication failure. To me, that's the biggest thing. It really is. It's the time frame. You got 5-10 minutes. What did Helene say? 11 seconds when you get into an appointment to make your case known and to have it so succinct and so abbreviated as to get right to the point. Well, we can't all do that. I mean, we're all. We can try the best we can, but we can't do all of that. And the doctors are under pressure. The nurses are under pressure. They just are. Supply and demand, the same thing. It's like a lumber yard almost anymore. I hate to say that.
Well, and when you're a hospital patient, you don't see the same doctor every day. There's a different doctor every day that comes in, and they may or may not communicate everything in their medical report because they're not always dictated right then.
Right. Right.
And then you have to wonder, well, does the next one read the report if it's there? And then does that report actually get sent?
I totally get that, Jeannie. On that note, stay listened to Evergreen Media Network.